The most hated rapper in Philadelphia, life as Mr. Disrespectful, YBC Dul. Philadelphia is one of the biggest cities in the United States, also known as the City of Brotherly Love. But in certain parts of the city, there is no love at all. In fact, there's a lot of violence, and young men are either being killed or going to jail. In the middle of all this is a rapper named YBC Dul, who has earned the nickname Mr. Disrespectful. YBC Dul is part of a group called the Young Bag Chasers, YBC, and they have become very well known in Philly. Unfortunately, they aren't famous for the right reasons. To understand how YBC Dul became Philadelphia's most hated rapper, we need to go back to 2017. That's when a man named Baby Con J100 came up with the name Young Bag Chasers. YBC was a group of guys from the streets who were trying to make money together. At first, they mostly focused on getting money, but things took a dark turn in 2019. In May 2019, one of the founding members of YBC, Joshua David Emson, also known as YBC Josh, was shot and killed in broad daylight near his home. His death hit the group hard, and his friends were determined to get revenge. Nearly a year later, in March 2020, YBC Dul and his crew allegedly took matters into their own hands. They are believed to have shot and killed a 19-year-old man named Nafi Hawkins, also known as Buddy. Buddy was playing basketball when he was shot multiple times. He died shortly after. This was just the beginning of a vicious cycle of violence that would see many more young men lose their lives or end up behind bars. But while most people would be devastated by such loss, YBC Dul did something surprising. He started mocking his enemies in his music. He didn't just talk about his own life or struggles, he bragged about the deaths of his rivals. YBC Dul's actions and lyrics earned him the nickname Mr. Disrespectful. The people in the comments of his music videos started calling him that because of how he made fun of the dead. One of his most shocking acts was when he went to a graveyard and pretended to dig up the grave of an enemy. His behavior shocked a lot of people, but it also made him more famous in the streets. Philadelphia's rap scene was heating up, and Dul's music became more popular as he continued to mock his enemies. But this also made him more hated. As he and his crew became more notorious, their enemies began to join forces. Several different groups in Philly, including the Campers, Clappers, and others, teamed up to form a supergroup called CCK, with one goal: take down YBC. Things got worse for YBC as 2021 rolled around. That year alone, YBC claimed the responsibility for 8 murders, according to some reports. Some of their top members were either dead or in jail. Reek 1200, a well-known member of YBC, was arrested for 2 homicides and faced 35 years to life in prison. Others, like Curry, were also caught and sentenced to multiple life sentences. YBC Dul's cousin, Doe Fetty, was shot and killed, and more members of the group ended up incarcerated or on the run. Despite all of this, YBC Dul was still on the streets, still making music, and still living the life of Mr. Disrespectful. He became one of the few remaining members of YBC who is still free, and this only added to his reputation. In an interview with Brandon Buckingham, YBC Dul gave people an inside look at his life and how he became who he is. He talked about growing up in Philly and how his nickname, Mr. Disrespectful, came from his fans. His fans started calling him that because of how he would go overboard when dissing people in his music. Dul admitted that he disrespected people badly, and that this was part of what made him stand out. One of the most disrespectful things he did was threaten to slap the mother of one of his enemies, a boy named K3. K3's mother had mocked the death of one of Dul's best friends, J100, on Instagram Live. Dul responded by threatening her in his music. While some people might find this shocking, Dul explained that it was just part of the cycle of violence that had consumed his life. Dul also talked about his infamous grave-digging stunt. He explained that it wasn't planned. He was already at the graveyard shooting a music video when one of his friends handed him a shovel and he decided to go along with it. He said it was just part of the way he lived his life, by going overboard with his disrespect. But life in the streets wasn't just about dissing people and making music. Dul talked about how dangerous Philly had become and how he had to stay on guard at all times. He carried guns for protection, even though he knew they were illegal. He also talked about riding around in strikers, cars with tinted windows that they used to hop out and strike their enemies. Despite all the danger and violence, Dul made it clear that he wasn't leaving Philly anytime soon. He said that he had to stay in the city to be with his friends, even though he admitted that staying there was a dumbass decision. But the streets were all he knew, and he wasn't ready to leave them behind just yet. As the interview wrapped up, Dul reflected on his future. He admitted that he didn't want to stay in Philly forever, and that he knew it wasn't a smart place to stay. But for now, he was still there, still living the life of Mr. Disrespectful. He talked about how he didn't just want to make music, he wanted to run the streets too. Dul also opened up about his dreams for the future. He said that he wanted to get rich and successful so that he could give back to his community. He talked about wanting to build shelters and feed people in the hood, even though he admitted that the goal wasn't to mess things up but to get rich. Unfortunately, things had gone sideways, and the violence had taken over. But even with all the danger around him, Dul wasn't ready to change his ways just yet. He was still focused on making a name for himself in the rap game and continuing to live life on his terms. As one of Philly's most hated rappers, he had a lot of enemies, but he also had a lot of fans who were eagerly waiting to see what he would do next. This story about YBC Dul is just one example of how the streets of Philadelphia can shape a person's life. From losing friends to violence to becoming one of the most notorious rappers in the city, Dul's journey is a reminder of the harsh realities of life in certain parts of America. While he has made a name for himself in the music world, it's clear that his path is far from easy, and his future is uncertain. Stay tuned to our channel for more celebrity news and stories like this one.